Okay, we're back for another video. So this time I'm back to look at this Singer. Now I've had a couple of these in the videos, different models. This is the first one I worked at. But crucially, a couple of little gadgets arrived. A couple of gears. Now you may or may not recall in the previous video, I designed and 3D printed a replacement gear that wasn't entirely perfect, but it did prove that this machine would function properly. Now I found for about $9 I could buy a full set of all the Teflon gears that needed to be replaced in this. Fortunately I only need to replace one of these, and tonight I'm going to look at probably replacing just the one, but looking at the state of the other gears to see at what point I may need to replace these. So let's get the cover off. One of the problems I have with hanging my leads like this is they do occasionally get snagged on things. But I have so many of them it doesn't really matter. Let's get all of this out of the way. This is the foot pedal, the original Bakelite foot pedal that came with this. If you haven't watched my other video, this is a hard waste sewing machine I picked up a number of years ago. I've actually lost count. I think my wife remembers better than I do. But this is a Singer, and it's a model 527. Not a bad sewing machine, but crucially the bobbin drive gear had broken, and I think that's why it had been left out on the curbside. So let's whip this bottom cover off and take a look at this gear. Okay, so I have both covers off. And just for the record, this is the one that goes here, which is a metal one, and this is a plastic cover here. One of the crucial differences I appreciate about this machine than the older Singer that I have is that both this leg here is removable and this is quite thin. So if I'm doing pant legs or small bags, I can put them over this and sew them quite cleanly. Whereas the other one has a big flat area that is designed probably for larger objects. In any case, this is the 3D printed replacement gear that I've put in there, and it works relatively well. We can see here that the mechanism moves around quite well. These gears are very old and grey and look much the same as the one that's been replaced. I don't know if I'll be replacing them today. It looks very involved, and I'm not keen to upset the timing of these until they actually break. So I might keep my other ones in reserve. Alright, I have myself a Sharpie. And it's actually a genuine Sharpie. Now, we're going to, if I can do this without my hands in the way, I'm going to try and make some markings here that correlate with the gears. And also this one here, so that we get my timing right. I think that's as close as I'm going to get it. So I think at this point, if I pull that gear off and don't move anything, we might be okay. Now, these have two grub screws, so I'm just loosening one and then the other very carefully. I'm going to prep the other gear first before removing the first. And these ones have only one grub screw in them. No, this one has two. Okay, so I guess they're for different positions. Let's get our camera a little bit close up on this. Right, so we can see where we're at. I'll show these up close. This has two grub screws in it. There's two there, same as the one that was originally on there. This one has only a single grub screw, and I'm sure there's a good reason for that. It does escape me at the moment. So let's get this gear removed carefully so as not to disturb the bobbin timing. I need the grub screw to come out a little bit more. Okay, that looks good. I do have a mark, so I'm not totally lost. I'll leave that there. And so we can see this is the 3D printed gear that I made. it did work okay. I did kind of mess it up a little bit when I was heating it and binding it on there. But I didn't really have much of a gear to go from. I only had some little pieces of the original. But when we look at the two side by side, it's not a bad analog, to be honest. So I don't feel too bad about that. Alright, so let's get this gear put back on here. Alright, so that looks like that's meshed into the same position. I'm not sure if you can see on camera, but this mark here was supposed to be on the same point as this black one here. So I think I'm fairly happy with that. Oh, and I need a bigger hex driver. Let's sort that out. Okay, so interesting turn of events, but not terribly surprising. The Chinese gears are metric, and the original Singers are imperial. But given that the original ones came out of Great Britain, that is not entirely surprising. Right. Now let's do this up with a firm but not over tight setting. That should be good there. Let's see if they mesh correctly. They do indeed. Now, I'm going to put just a single drop of sewing machine oil on this. It may have been what contributed to the failure of it in the past, but I should probably use a PTFE dry lube spray, which I actually happen to have some. So let's give it a little bit of that as well. And watch some of you cringe when you see the horrible mix of PTFE and oil. So, see how we go here. In fact, that seems to be working rather well. Alright, now we need to flip this over and see if we can get the timing right, or if it's still correct. Okay, so I'm going to attempt this one-handed. First thing I need to do is pull a little bit of thread through the bobbin. Now, let's see if I can find a pointer here. So, this little piece way down in the bottom here, this is a rotating hook. It runs around and it should pick up a loop from under the needle here, pull it over the bobbin and back up again. And that's how it forms the lower stitch. So let's see if we are winding in the correct direction. That little bit you see moving backwards and forwards, that little line, that is the indicator mark for the timing. As we go a little bit further along, we'll see the hook itself just there. So if you're looking through this little gap right about there, you will see, if I go forwards and backwards a bit, you'll see that hook coming through. So as we come along, we should do a full revolution. Our needle goes in, there's our timing mark. And as we just start to lift up, it should form a loop. The hook should grab that, and then it should pull it over the top of the bobbin and back out again. And normally we would have a little bit of tension, and that would continue the job to come all the way around like that. And there's our first stitch. So I think that timing is perfect. Well, from here we need to reassemble a few things. I am actually going to undo the thread that I've just done to make the reassembly process just that little bit easier. We'll pull that back. And I'm going to pull this through the top so we can put the cover plate on without achieving tangle status. It's not good. And there's my light source dropping down from under here. Let's put our cover plate back on there, and there is a little lever that needs to rotate just in the right position to make that fit back again, that I never seem to get right. So how's that for a lighting change? I seem to have it stuck. Let me consult the manual. That's our studio lighting put back in place, and we'll slide our foot plate back in place. Technically that's a cover plate and that's a foot plate, I believe. And I'm noticing there's some numbering marks here. I'm not entirely sure what they're for. Somebody who is better versed with sewing machines will probably tell me what they are. And in the case, let's get our cover plates or back on the bottom and see how we go with this. Well, now that I have the cover plates on and I've got the correct gear in place, it might be time for me to chip off these LRFs or LCRFs, little crunchy rubber feet, and replace them so that we don't walk all over the table. I'm not sure if I have anything spare. I might have to stop into my local store, my local hardware store, which is community run, I guess you could call it. Yeah, and we'll tip everything up, I think. But anyway, in the meantime, I'm going to thread some thread through this and see how she stitches. Alright, so the frustrating part is upon us, is threading a new spool of thread which goes under this way. We need to go around that hook, and then we need to go under that one, and we go back to this guy, and then we go down there and through this one and down to our needle. Now this is the tricky part, is getting the needle threaded. Alright, so I'm sorry if I've been speaking a smidgen on the quiet side, but it's an unusual time at night where everything is actually really quiet in this house. Anyway, there's a lot of different ways of cutting thread properly and threading a needle. You know what, I'm just going to use what I've got with me, which is this little lighter. Okay, now the upshot of this, because it's a synthetic thread, I now have this nice little thread strand out here, which I'm going to snip cleanly. Now the way I was taught by my grandmother and my mother is to thread these using to thread this after licking the thread, and gets all the threads together. I found in my situation it's much easier to remove the needle and do this with a synthetic thread. I believe we go through this side first. Now, trying to do this through a viewfinder on the camera is a smidgen challenging, harder than usual. Here we go though. I had it threaded, but of course I now have oil on my hands because I over oiled the mechanism. But here we go, our leader is through. We should be able to pull the rest through from here. There we go. That's my way of doing it. There's loads of better ways of doing it, but this is just my way of doing it. Now I need to remember which way the needle goes. Fiddly stuff on camera. It's a great way to look like a fool. And you watch, I'll end up having this in the wrong position by the time we're done. Yep, give me one moment to get this in properly. I think that's correct there. Or no, it's not. Give me one moment. Alright, well, it's sorted. I did have it mostly correct. It was just doing it on camera is always the challenge. So let's see how we go here. We need to pull a little bit of bobbin through and a little bit of this thread through. So let's just double check that we've got things going in the right direction here, because I have a habit of getting it wrong. That way, okay. So let's go this way. There we go. Let's wind things in here and see if we can hook up our bobbin through here. That looks good. Pull this up like that. Okay, we're looking good now. I think we start like so. Okay, so I brought some workshop rags in to test on. Let's try that out. Okay, so my foot pedal is on an unusually short lead, and given the position I'm in at the moment, I'm going to have to use the foot pedal with my hand, which only leaves me one hand to guide everything going on here. So let's just see how we go. Let's move back a little bit. By now you've probably seen a sewing machine work before, but let's turn everything on and see how we go here. Well, it feels smoother than it used to. This is 2 layers of workshop rag, by the way. I think I've got it set up on the finest stitch pattern I can. It's not snapping the thread at high speed, so I think my earlier gear had a bit of backlash. Okay, let's just pull things up here, and let's just give our little bit of a gas torch here. Alright, let's have a look at how this worked. Alright, well, it's the next morning with the Singer saga, and this is a Rose's chocolate tin. It's not the traditional shortbread tin that you might find these things in, but I did consider getting a nice compartmentalized box for all the bits I've been buying for this machine. However, I had 2 of these on the shelf and I thought, you know what, let's carry on the tradition of keeping sewing stuff in a tin. So now, let's see what I've been shopping for. I found some black fabric for fixing a pair of shorts, and those torn shorts are what started this whole repairing sewing machines. I got some dressmaker's pins. I've got some LRFs, some little rubber feet, also known as screw-on bumpers, for fixing the feet of the sewing machine. And well, that's just fallen out of the packet. I was looking for a replacement globe for this machine, and I found for the same price I can buy LED upgrades, and that really solves a whole big project I'd actually planned to film, was making a mains voltage LED upgrade for sewing machine. Well, the Chinese have beaten me to it, so $10 worth, we'll just do that. I've also got some assorted thread here, including some like nice fluorescent stuff so that we can see how the stitch patterns are going. And I've got some olive drab and some black because I have a lot of camouflage gear. And I've got a pack of assorted needles just in case I bust one. I've got about 50 or so of those coming from China. But yeah, they're not here yet. And they've gone through, I think, Yanwen Post or something like that. And they take like 50 days to get stuff here. It is so worth the $1.70 to get it sent through some other service like EMS. But any case, let's go and put these rubber feet on. Well, we managed to get them all on. I was forced to make an adaptation here. I've used, when I can focus on it, I've used some 4mm bolts for these, and 1 Phillips 4mm screw, simply because I didn't have 3 bolts. I only had 3 bolts, I didn't have 4. But they seem to have gone on okay. They were originally designed for stepped feet, so these look like they're on a bit of an angle, but they're nice, soft latex rubber feet, so I think they'll be fine. I have kept the original screws, and I'm not sure if 4mm was exactly correct. It fitted very nicely, but it could also have been a close second to some imperial measurement. But in either case, we have rubber feet on. It's not sliding around, scratching the table anymore, and it shouldn't rock and move while we're using it. So let's get on to more interesting bits of this. Right, well, we now have some help in the form of my apprentice here. He's going to help us wind a bobbin. Fire away. We've got it threaded properly now. Yep. Keep going. Well, okay, he's up. Alright, there we go. Now we've got it wound properly. That's good.
Look,
now let's unlock our bobbin. There's a nice fluoro orange bobbin. Okay, let's just snip our thread here. So we have a nicely wound bobbin thanks to my apprentice. And now, our apprentice has been learning. Have to pull the white thread out first. We've got the foot up. Young apprentice is learning quite well. Need to pull the white stuff out first. Alright, we'll get on with threading this up and we'll see what we can do. Sewing machine life. Trying to get the bobbin out.
Can you use a help?
We need something to help, do we? We've resorted to using a tool now.
It's working!
We've all got to learn somewhere. Oh, sorry about the fuzzy of camera angle, guys.
It works.
We'll skip to when we've got this out. Alright, so my apprentice eventually managed that. Now we have to put the new bobbin in. Okay.
Daddy.
Did you put it in wrong? We'll figure it out. There we go. Alright, now we have to thread it properly, so I'll teach her the next step because I can't do that one-handed. Okay, so my apprentice is going to load up the sewing machine here. Put the foot down. And now we're going to put a little bit of stuff through. We discovered we had a tangle in the threading. Now you ready to go, apprentice? Ready? Here we go. No, don't put your foot on that. You'll get your fingers stuck. Watch what you're doing up here. Yep. Ready? We're going to go. Go. Here we go. Stitching, stitching in a zigzag stitch. We're not advancing very far. We've got a tangle here.
Give me the zigzag.
Okay, you want the zigzag?
Yeah.
Keep your fingers clear. Right? You're going to set the zigzag setting. Alright.
Yes.
Let's go. Ready? Ready? Let's go. Stitch, stitch. Just slowly. That's looking better. Let's pull that through the other side. Here we go. How you going? We're getting some tangles here. Oh. Here we go. Let's continue on. Oh, the apprentice has got hold of the foot pedal. Yep. Alright, I'm going to have to override here.
Yes.
Okay, do the foot up. Yep, that's right. Wind the needle up and we'll pull out and have a look and see what your stitching's like. I think we may have increased the the zigzag gap a little bit. Let's have a look at this up close. Now, I'm not sure if any of you have dealt with apprentices before, but they do come with their drawbacks. What fun. But she's learning at least, and hopefully she'll be a pro in later years. Well, the moment of truth has arrived. This is my favourite pair of work shorts. In fact, I have several of these. I bumped into an open door frame the other day with a lot in the pocket, and of course it tore here. So this is not an uncommon occurrence with me. So I have found myself about $5 worth of material here that is of a similar grade, weight and make. Keep in mind these shorts are about $60 a pair, so I wouldn't mind repairing these. So I think I'm going to have to make myself a little patch and hem it as well. We'll see how we go. Well, before I get started and start stitching my patch here, I've realized I need some light to see what I'm doing. And I have the original Singer branded globe here, made for the Singer company, but I'm going to modernize, mostly because the original globe is blown. I figure I might try putting some LEDs in here. So let's go ahead and do that. Up here, this is a bayonet cap type. Cool, let's drop this in here and let's see what happens when we turn things on. Well, nothing apparently. Alright, so I turned the wrong switch on. It now works. It's a little different to what I would have expected. I might put that in the sandblaster and add some diffusing to it later. But let's turn off the overhead lights. And it looks like I'm going to have a reasonable amount of light to do what I need to do. And it's LED, so it won't get so hot. It should be very nice. And apparently my apprentice is up to something. I need to go check that out. Okay, so that was nothing too terrible to worry about. She was just trying to vacuum the floors. Anyway, we've got this all loaded up. And I think that I probably need to rethread this because I buggered things up, but that's alright. I think it's time to get stitching. And as I said before, I'm going to do this off camera so that I make sure I get it right. Well, I have to say one thing. Black clothing is not great on exposure values. Here we go. Well, I've got my patch pinned in place, and I have to mention that these have not been washed, but they do look horrible under this light. In reality, they're not quite so faded looking. Anyway, I've probably got a few too few pins here to hold this in place, but it should keep it in place and keep it out of my stitching line. Alright, let's get stitching. Well, I've had to pause halfway through because the LED light that I just fitted is woefully inadequate for black stuff. So let's keep going. Well, I have to say this is a very long way from my proudest sewing moment, but given that I haven't done this for well over 20 years, I think it's probably not too bad an effort. But it's functional at least, and we can see in here the tear still exists on the inside. I have seen some people that would put a big cross pattern across this patch to help stabilize that tear, and I might well do that yet. We'll see how we go. Well, I was all done and nearly ready to wrap this video up, and then this happened. Now this is the other set of gears that I had, and they control the foot movement. I've been in the process of making a little project for my apprentice, and it stopped working. So here's all these little gear teeth sprinkled in here. So we are going to have to replace these after all. Yay. Okay, so now we're experiencing a different problem. I have taken a little tiny spring clip or circlip off the end of this shaft that allows that shaft to move. I've then loosened this gear here so that this all can slide along, and that shaft is now colliding with this. So this is where the whole calibration of the machine gets out of whack. So I'm glad I've marked these two, because I have to remove this again to get this one off. So yeah, let's keep going with that. Okay, so we can see I've removed the main gear here, and I've slid this shaft back, and I should be able to slide this gear off and remove it. The challenge is going to be this little guy down here. That is going to be trouble. I'll get this gear back on first, then we'll work on that one. Hopefully things don't get too far out of calibration. This could be a bit of a nightmare if they do. Now I'm just examining the difference between these two gears here. I'm noticing this one doesn't have this little extra peg here, but I presume that's for a sensor or something in a more modern Singer. But looking at the assembly here, I can't see that getting in the way with anything, so I think that'll be just fine. I don't think I need to chop that off or anything silly. Well, I'm desperately trying to preserve the calibration I've already done, and I'm going to have a problem here. This little bit here is a nice flat. I've noticed that correlates pretty closely with this screw and this mark that I've done here. The problem is going to emerge. This is the main input shaft, and I'm going to need to remove that to slide this shaft out, and I may even need to slide the shaft all the way up to that and then remove this. But let's find out if I can actually get this out. Okay, so I had to take the electrical input box with a switch assembly. I had to remove that, slide the shaft clear out the hole, loosen the input cog, take a circlip off, and now I've got access to this gear. And if everything's done right, this should just slide off. I think I've got to come a little bit further out, and it's colliding with something else. So if I can do this one-handed, we bring it along a little further. There's our gear out, and then we chuck our new one back in. If I can do this one-handed, this could be tricky. Well, the good news is it's meshing with the other gear nicely. There we go. It's on. Okay, let's get everything back in position. Alright, so at this point I'm really making quite a few guesses. I have managed to get the bobbin and the bobbin hook in timing with the needle, but it's the foot that I'm worried about. So I've got it coming in here, doing our stitch, returning up with the foot, and as the needle has removed, it's starting to move backwards. Then it's retracting under the foot plate, needle is going in, foot is coming up, just as the needle is out. I'm hoping that timing's correct. I could probably delay it a little bit, but I think that's about as close as I'm going to get it. Let's see if this works. We've replaced all the gears. I'll give you a quick look underneath at that. Okay, so everything is mostly back in place. Now, if you happen to be doing this yourself, I've noticed that on this shaft, which is not visible now that the gears are here, there are flat planes on here designed to mesh with the grub screws in the gears. That is a good indicator of timing, and if you follow those things, you can generally be a maximum of 180 degrees out of phase with everything. So now this gear is long because in some situations it moves backwards and forwards, or the shaft slides backwards and forwards in order to do its job, or at least that's what I believe. I think this might be the one that moves backwards and forwards. But anyway, we seem to have everything moving. We can rotate our main shaft here, see our two gears mesh here, and that goes there, although it is a little stiff in some positions. So I think those new gears need a little bit of lubrication. So I'll get into doing that. The old gears we can see here, this one had crumbled much like the other ones, and I think that's age and sewing machine oil that's responsible for that. This is much the state and the colour of the original gear that was driving the bobbin that I 3D printed a replacement for. This is the 3D printed replacement that I pressed onto the original shaft and the original mounting. I forget the name for that, but it's a nice little die that has teeth on the top for holding the gear on. This is the old gear that seems to have already been replaced in the past, but it's in reasonable condition, but I replaced that with a new one anyway, given the fate of the other two. And it looks like these have had Teflon gears replaced. Sounds like my neighbour. Looks like I've had Teflon gear replacements in this before, but they didn't bother to do the difficult ones, and I can understand why. That is a challenging bit of work when you're not familiar with the way these machines are laid out. In any case, let's get these base plates back on and see if this thing actually stitches a decent stitch. Alright, let's try again. Let's see if this will create a loop and pick it up. Aha! It does. Okay, that's good. Alright, now I'm going to try a couple of gentle stitches by hand here. I'm going to unthread this. I'm going to put a little bit of fabric through and try some manual stitches without the motor drive engaged. Rightio, we're loaded up. For the record, this thread or stitch pattern here was done with a 3D printed gear installed. So let's just wind this in and see if we get something happening here. It sounds like it's working. I think I've got the tension a little high on the tensioner at the top here, but see how we go. I'm going to wind this through just manually a few repetitions. So far it seems to be working, and I haven't snapped a needle, so I think my timing's probably pretty good. Alright, let's stop this here, see if we're actually sewing. Well, it looks like I've been reasonably successful here. I have some stitches, and you notice I'm doing black thread on white fabric to help you see what's going on here. So I think that's going to do the job. Now I have to put all my settings back to where I was, and we'll see if we can finish that project. It was supposed to be a little bonus project, and now it's a crumpled heap, but we'll get back to that. Okay, well, it sews rather nicely now, probably better than before. And this is the little project I was working on, and my horribly uneven stitching. This doesn't matter. This is just a little bag for my apprentice to take some stuff to school in. If you can bear with this one-handed work. I've hidden some magnets in the end here, so it just snaps shut. See, we can probably demonstrate here if the exposure doesn't keep having a heart attack. There we go. So it just drops in, clips in place, and keeps reasonably sturdy. That's just a practice to get me used to using the machine, and I'm guessing that the practice is worthwhile because it did indicate to me that the gears needed replacing. So yeah, bodgy first attempt. Well, actually this probably has to have been the first time I've actually used a sewing machine in anger, probably since my high school days. And in home economics in high school, I think I was the only bloke in a class full of ladies. I did reasonably well actually, but my hand has been unsteady lately. So, but this was a practice job, so if it's useful, it's useful. If it's not, it was a practice run. So this time I'm actually going to end the video because I'm finished, and if something breaks, I'm not going to video it. I'm just going to shove it in a corner and fix it later. So thanks guys. This is the second end to the one video, if that's possible. And I hope you enjoy watching me mess around with sewing machines. I've got some electronic stuff to come back with soon. I think that's my 12-volt uninterruptible power supply board. But we'll get to that when we get to it. In any case, happy sewing.